The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was a place of cold stone and even colder hearts. For 1,000 years, the Council had ruled the stars. They were made up of many alien races, some with 4 arms, some with scales, and some that looked like floating clouds of gas. They were old, powerful, and very arrogant. At the very edge of their maps sat a small, blue planet called Earth. To the Council, humans were nothing more than children playing with fire. They were latecomers to the galaxy, barely 100 years into their space travel. The Council tolerated them, but they did not respect them. Commander Elias Thorne stood at the center of the hall. He was a tall man with gray hair and scars from old wars. He was the ambassador for the United Nations of Earth. Today, he wasn't there to trade or share science. He was there to beg for mercy. A plague had hit the human colonies on Mars and Europa. It was not a natural sickness. It was a bio-weapon leaked from a council lab during a secret experiment. Millions of humans were dying. Their skin turned to glass, and their lungs stopped working. Elias looked up at the High Counselor, a creature named Xylus, who had skin like polished obsidian. "We need the cure," Elias said. His voice was steady, but his hands were clenched tight at his sides. "Our doctors have identified the strain. It belongs to the Council. You have the antidote. People are dying every hour. Children are dying. Please, give us the help we need." High Counselor Xylus did not look concerned. He leaned back in his floating chair. "Commander Thorne, you speak of need as if the universe owes you something. The accident at the lab was unfortunate, yes, but the antidote is expensive to produce. It requires resources that the Council cannot waste on a tier 4 species. Your population is high. Perhaps this is simply nature's way of balancing your rapid expansion. Return to your planet, mourn your dead, but do not demand things from your superiors." The other members of the Council whispered among themselves. Some laughed. They saw the humans as a joke. Elias felt a heat rising in his chest. It wasn't just anger. It was something deeper, something that humans had kept hidden for a long time, since they reached the stars. It was the old fire of Earth, the fire that burned during the world wars, the fire that pushed them to survive ice ages and disasters. He looked at the Council one last time. He didn't see leaders. He saw bullies. "Is this your final answer?" Elias asked. His voice was now very quiet. In the military, a quiet voice was always more dangerous than a loud one. "It is," Xylus replied, waving a hand to dismiss him. "Go home, human. Accept your fate." Elias turned around without a word. He walked out of the hall, his boots clicking loudly on the stone floor. As he reached his ship, the UES Valkyrie, his second in command, Sarah Chen, was waiting for him. She saw the look in his eyes and knew the answer. "They said no?" she asked. Her voice was shaking with grief. Her brother was on Mars, currently fighting for his life. "They didn't just say no, Sarah," Elias said as the ramp closed behind them. "They told us to die quietly. They think we are weak. They think we will just sit in the dark and cry." He sat in the captain's chair and looked at the view screen. The Council station was a massive, beautiful structure, glowing with lights. It looked untouchable. Elias opened a secure channel to Earth Command. He didn't call the politicians. He called the Admiralty. "This is Commander Thorne," he said. "The Council has crossed the line. They have left us. No choice. Initiate Protocol 0. Break the seals on the old vaults. If they want us to be a Diblan, tier 4 species, we will show them exactly what a primitive race does when it is backed into a corner, back on Earth, deep under the mountains of the Himalayas and the deserts of Australia." Massive doors began to open. These were doors that had stayed shut for a century. Inside were not just ships, but weapons of a different age. Weapons that the Council thought humans had forgotten. The rage of humanity had been sparked, and as the first human fleet began to move toward the jump gates, the stars themselves seemed to tremble. There was no turning back now. For decades, the galaxy thought humans were peaceful. They were traders, artists, and explorers. But the Council had forgotten where humans came from. They came from a world of predators, storms, and endless conflict. While the Council spent centuries in luxury, humans had spent their history learning how to win at any cost. When the news reached Earth that the Council had denied the cure, the planet didn't fall into chaos. It fell into a deadly silence. Every factory stopped making cars and began making shells. Every shipyard stopped building transports and began building destroyers. In the shipyards of Luna, the dreadnought Bismarck II was being fueled. It was 5 kilometers of steel and hate. Admiral Marcus Vance stood on the bridge. He was a man who had studied every war in human history. He knew that the Council's ships were elegant and used shields based on light. Human ships were different. They were armored in thick plates of tungsten and fired heavy chunks of metal at a fraction of the speed of light. It was primitive technology, but it was devastating. "Admiral, the first wave is ready," a technician reported. "The Council has sent a small patrol to our borders. They think they are here to keep us in line." "Let them come," Vance said. "They think they are the masters of the house. They forgot that we are the ones who built the foundation. Open the hangars. Launch the Wasps." The Council patrol consisted of 3 sleek, golden ships. They were the Xylian Grace, beautiful vessels that looked like birds. They moved toward the human border, broadcasting messages of peaceful containment. They expected the humans to surrender or hide. Instead, they saw a swarm. Thousands of tiny, unmanned drones, wasps, poured out of the human stations. They didn't use lasers. They used kinetic impactors. They were flying bullets. The golden ships fired their light beams, melting many drones, but there were too many. The drones hit the shields of the Council ships like hail on a glass window. The shields flickered and died. Then, the Bismarck II fired its main railgun. A 3-ton slug of metal tore through the first golden ship, passing through one side and out the other. The ship didn't explode. It simply shattered. The beautiful bird of the Council was now a cloud of debris. The other 2 ships tried to flee, but the humans weren't interested in a fair fight. They were interested in a message. The human fleet jumped into warp, following the survivors. They weren't just defending their borders anymore. They were going to the source. The Council had tried to starve humanity of life, so humanity would starve the Council of peace. On Earth, the cure was being manufactured in secret. Human scientists hadn't waited for the Council's help. They had used forbidden brute force AI to decode the plague. They were healing their own, but the anger remained. The Council had shown their true face, and the humans had decided they didn't like what they saw. The sleeping giant of the Milky Way was finally awake, and it was reaching for its sword. The Council's outer colonies were beautiful, peaceful worlds. They had no walls and no armies because they believed no one would ever dare to attack the Council. That changed. On a Tuesday, the sky over the planet Oros turned red as the human fleet arrived. It wasn't a slow arrival. It was a violent entry. Hundreds of human ships dropped out of warp. At once, their engines screaming. The humans didn't target the cities. They didn't target the civilians. They targeted the orbital shipyards and the energy hubs. They were surgical and cold. General Sarah Chen, leading the ground forces, looked down at the planet from her drop pod. She felt no joy in this, only a grim sense of duty. "Remember," she told her troops over the comms, "we are not here to be like them. We are here to show them that we are the ones they should have feared. Take the hubs. Disable the grid. If they resist, show them why Earth was once called the graveyard of empires." The Council's local defense force was a joke. They were guards in ceremonial armor with weapons that hadn't been fired in years. When the human Marines landed, wearing thick power armor and carrying automatic rifles, the defense force turned and ran. The humans moved like a single machine. They were fast, loud, and terrifying. Within 3 hours, the entire planet was under human control. The humans didn't loot. They didn't destroy homes. They simply sat on the thrones of the governors and waited. When the governor of Oros was brought before Sarah Chen, he was shaking. "You are monsters," he cried. The council will destroy you for this. You are just monkeys with stolen tools. Sarah looked at him. She held up a small glass vial. It was the plague that the council had refused to cure. This is what your council gave my people, she said. We didn't come here to kill you. We came here to show you what happens when you treat us as lesser. Your council thought we were a resource. We are going to show them we are a storm. She turned to her officer. Send a message to the High Council. Tell them Oros is ours. Tell them if they want it back, they can come and try. But remind them that every human they killed with their plague is a ghost that now haunts their borders. The dead is being collected. Back at the Galactic capital, the mood had changed from arrogance to pure terror. The news of Oros had hit like a bomb. The monkeys were winning. Reports were coming in from all over the sector. Human fleets were appearing where they weren't supposed to be. They weren't using the standard jump lanes that the council monitored. They were using dangerous slip space maneuvers that no sane species would try. But humans weren't being sane. They were being driven by a righteous fury. High Counselor Xylus paced his chambers. His obsidian skin looked dull. How is this possible? He screamed at his generals. They are primitives. Their ships are made of iron. Our lasers should melt them. Their ships are not just iron, Counselor, a general said, his voice trembling. They are layered with materials we haven't seen in centuries. And they don't use lasers. They use mass drivers. They are throwing rocks at us. But they are throwing them at 4%, the speed of light. Our shields are designed to stop energy, not physical impact. It's like trying to stop a charging beast with a flashlight. The council tried to call for a ceasefire. They sent a message to Earth, offering a trade deal and a partial cure. The response from Earth was a single image, a photo of a human cemetery on Mars, filled with small white crosses. Under the photo was one word: no. The council realized they had made a terrible mistake. They had poked a creature they didn't understand. They had assumed that because humans were young, they were weak. They didn't realize that humans had spent their entire existence fighting for every inch of ground they owned. Now, the humans were coming for the council's ground. The council voted to mobilize their entire Great Fleet 10,000 ships. It was the largest force ever assembled. They hoped that the sheer size of the fleet would scare the humans into retreating, but the humans didn't retreat. They gathered their own fleet at the edge of the council's home system. They weren't 10,000, they were barely 1,000. But as the council fleet approached, they saw that the human ships were different. They were painted matte black. They had no lights. They looked like shadows waiting to swallow the sun. The battle for the soul of the galaxy was about to begin. The Battle of the Nebula was the largest space conflict in history. The Council's great fleet moved in a perfect, beautiful formation. They fired their beams of light, illuminating the dark clouds of gas with colors of purple and gold. It looked like a dance, but the humans didn't dance. They charged. The human fleet formed a wedge designed to pierce the center of the Council's line. They ignored the damage to their outer hulls. They let their armor soak up the heat. They had one goal: to get close. At close range, the Council's long-range beams were useless, but the human railguns and torpedoes were deadly. The Bismarck II led the charge, its guns firing every 3 seconds. Each thump of the railgun sent a message of revenge into the heart of the Council fleet. Ships that had stood for centuries were torn apart in minutes. The humans used boarding pods, metal drills filled with soldiers who crashed through the hulls of the Council ships and fought room to room. It was brutal, dirty, and effective. Admiral Vance watched the chaos from his bridge. They think they can win with numbers, he muttered, but they don't have a reason to fight. We do. We are fighting for the people they let die. We are fighting for our right to exist without their permission. The Council fleet began to break. The aliens, who had never known a real war, couldn't handle the ferocity of the humans. When a Council ship took damage, its crew would panic and try to flee. When a human ship took damage, its crew would work harder, fighting even as their oxygen ran low. The human spirit was not just a myth, it was a tactical advantage. By the end of the day, Half of the Council's great fleet was in ruins. The rest were in full retreat. The way to the capital was open. The humans had broken the wall of fire. They were no longer the species that everyone ignored. They were the masters of the battlefield. As the human ships began their final jump toward the Council's home world, the galaxy watched, in silence. The line had been crossed, and the humans were now the ones who would decide what the future looked like. The Council's homeworld, Centauri Prime, was a planet of glass towers and floating gardens. It had not seen a weapon fired on its soil in 3,000 years. Now, the sky was filled with the black shapes of human dropships. The planetary shields, once thought to be unbreakable, had been shattered by a human invention called the sledgehammer, a massive asteroid outfitted with engines and slammed into the shield grid. It was crude, it was violent, and it worked perfectly. Commander Elias Thorne was in the first dropship to land in the Capitol Plaza. He stepped out onto the white marble, his boots stained with the soot of war. Around him, the city was in a panic. The council members were trying to reach their private shuttles, but human fighters were circling above, making sure no one left. This wasn't an invasion for land. It was a forced trial. The human Marines moved through the streets with professional precision. They didn't fire on civilians. They didn't burn the libraries. They moved straight for the council chamber. When they reached the heavy gold doors, Elias didn't ask for them to be opened. He signaled a combat engineer. A small explosive charge blew the doors off their hinges, and the humans walked in. Inside, the council was huddled together. High Counselor Xylus was at the center, his face pale with shock. He looked at Elias, then at the soldiers with their rifles. You cannot do this," Xylus stammered. "This is the center of galactic civilization. You are barbarians. We are the people you left to die," Elias said, his voice echoing in the large room. "We are the ones who found a way to survive your arrogance. You sit here, in your towers, and decide who lives and who dies based on a spreadsheet. Well, today, the spreadsheet is closed. We are taking control of the council, not as your new masters, but as your keepers." Elias walked up to the High Counselor's seat and threw a data pad onto the desk. "On that pad is the cure for the plague. Our scientists perfected it and made it better. We are going to distribute it to our colonies, and then we are going to distribute it to yours. Because, unlike you, we actually care about life. But from now on, the council is disbanded. There will be a new assembly, and for the first time, humanity will be the ones writing the rules." The months following the fall of the council were a time of great change. The humans did not stay as conquerors. Once the new government, the Galactic Union, was established, they began to pull their fleets back. They didn't want to rule the galaxy. They just wanted to make sure no one could ever look down on them again. The human military remained strong, but they shifted their focus to protection and reconstruction. General Sarah Chen oversaw the rebuilding of Oros and other worlds that had been caught in the crossfire. She was surprised to find that many of the alien races were actually happy the council was gone. They had been living under the council's thumb for a long time, too afraid to speak up. Now, with the humans leading the way, they were discovering what it meant to have a voice. The human rage had cleared the way for a human peace. However, not everyone was happy. Remnants of the old council's forces were hiding in the great, dark corners of the galaxy. They saw the humans as a virus that needed to be purged. They began to plan a counterattack, hoping to use the humans' own mercy against them. They thought that because the humans were helping people, they had grown soft again. They were wrong. Admiral Vance, on the Bismarck II, was tracking these loyalists. He knew the war wasn't truly over until the last of the old tyrants was gone. He sat in his chair, looking at the star maps. "They think we've forgotten how to fight because we started to heal," he said to his crew. "They don't realize that we are only at peace because we choose to be. If they want to test our rage again, we will be ready. This time, we won't just break their doors, we will tear down the walls. The humans had changed the galaxy forever. They had proven that a species' worth wasn't measured by how long they had been in space, but by the fire in their hearts. The stars were no longer a cold, distant place ruled by old gods. They were a home for anyone brave enough to stand up for what was right. And at the center of it all was Earth, the little blue planet that had shown the universe that, when you cross the line with humanity, there is no turning back. Years passed, and the story of the human explosion became a legend. Children, across 1,000 worlds, were told the story of the race that refused to die quietly. The Galactic Union was flourishing, trade was open, and for the first time, technology was shared. Freely, the plague was a memory, and the glass towers of Centauri Prime now housed representatives from every corner of the stars, all equal under the law. Commander Elias Thorne, now retired, sat on a porch on Earth, looking up at the night sky. He could see the lights of the orbital stations, busy with ships from a dozen different species. He felt a sense of peace he hadn't known during the war. He had done his job. Humanity was safe, and the galaxy was better for it. But he also knew the burden they carried. Humanity was now the guardian of the peace. They were the ones the other races looked to when things went wrong. It was a heavy weight, but one that humans were built to carry. They had survived their own wars, their own disasters, and now they had survived the galaxy's judgment. They were no longer the children of the stars. They were the veterans. As the sun set over the green hills of Earth, Elias smiled. He knew that somewhere out there, another young race was looking up at their own sky, wondering if they were alone. And he knew that when they finally reached the stars, they wouldn't find a cold council waiting for them. They would find a hand reached out in friendship, a human hand, but that hand would also be a reminder. Treat us with respect, and we are your best friends. Treat us with cruelty, and we are your worst nightmare. The galaxy was finally at rest. The rage had burned itself out, leaving behind a light that would shine for 1,000 generations. There was no turning back, and for the first time, everyone was glad of it. The era of humanity had begun, not through conquest, but through the simple, unstoppable power of a people who refused to give up. The stars were finally home.